Authorities in Gaza updated the death toll and injury toll of the Israeli occupiers' genocidal operation, saying attacks claimed the lives of 28,730 Palestinians and raised the number of wounded to 67,984. In Venezuela, Attorney General Tarek William Saab informed that there are 19 people involved in a case of conspirative plot against the nation known as Operation Bracelet Blanco. Strong protests erupted in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo against the governments of the United States, France, Rwanda, and the United Kingdom that cooperate with the silent Holocaust in the country. Hello and welcome to From the South. I'm Alejandra Garcia from teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Authorities Authorities in Gaza on Wednesday updated the death and injury toll of the Israeli occupiers' genocidal operation, saying attacks claimed the lives of 28,730 Palestinians and raised the number of wounded to 67,984. On the 131st day of the genocide in Gaza, the Health Ministry indicated that Zionist army bombed again refugee camps in Deir al-Balah East and Nusayrat in central Gaza. On the other hand, Palestinian authorities reported that the siege persists also in Khan Yunis, where occupation forces opened fire from helicopters. In this regard, according to the latest data from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, 360,000 Gaza's homes or residential units have been destroyed or damaged, 392 educational facilities were devastated, and only 11 out of 35 hospitals are partially functioning. The Palestinian resistance movement Hamas on Wednesday denounced the alleged special operation by Israeli forces to rescue two Argentine citizens as a fraud. In this sense, Hamas assures that the alleged hostages were never in its hands and added that the rescued Israeli citizens were in the hands of a family that charged for the rescue. On the other hand, the resistance movement also denounced that a British intermediary was the link between the Abu Sarwar family and the Jewish relatives. It should be noted that the exchange cost $2 million, $1 million for each kidnapped person, while compensation for the demolition of the Sarwar family's home also was part of the agreement. In this way, Mohammed Nassel, a senior official of the Islamic resistance, assured that it was another lie of the occupier and that the two Israeli citizens were handed over peacefully by their family. We go now to Palestine, where our correspondent in Gaza will provide us with more details after a local entities confirmed that the official death toll exceeds 28,500 fatalities at the hands of the Zionist aggression.
According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, the Israeli forces committed 11 massacres in Gaza today. They said also in the statement that 103 Palestinians were killed in Gaza. And this brings up the death toll here in Gaza since the 7th of October up to 28,576 Palestinians. 70% of them are women and children. And this comes after a series of Israeli strikes on different areas and cities around Gaza, from its north to its south. We are talking about strikes in northern Gaza and central Gaza City. We are talking about intensive Israeli shelling in eastern Al-Nusayrat refugee camp and also eastern Al-Burej refugee camp. We are talking about an Israeli land invasion in the heart of city of Khan Yunis and the Israeli blockade on the Al-Nasser hospital, where they forced the Palestinians, the displaced Palestinians, the medical team, and even the patients and the people who are injured inside the hospital to evacuate the hospital on foot, and also adding the Israeli airstrikes here in Rafah, which is supposed to be a green zone, a green area. This continuous Israeli attack on Gaza continues for the 131 days, while Palestinians are suffering the very bad humanitarian situation. Reports coming from the north is saying that the people now have turned to grind the animal feed to feed themselves, and in some areas even the animal feed is not available. Noor Harazin, teleSUR, Gaza.
The independent panel investigated allegations against United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, began its work on Wednesday. The initiative is coordinated by the former Chancellor of France, Catherine Colonna, and brings together experts from Sweden, Norway, and Denmark. The panel is due to submit an interim report to Guterres in late March and a final one in late April, with, if necessary, recommendations for improvement and strengthening of the agency's mechanisms. The group will review mechanisms and procedures currently in place at the humanitarian agency to ensure its neutrality and determine whether there are indeed ties to the Palestinian resistance group Hamas. On Wednesday, the Attorney General of Venezuela, Tarek William Saab, informed that there are 19 people involved in a case of conspiracy plot against his nation known as Operation Bracelet Blanco, which had the assumed objective of attacking the governor of the Táchira state, Freddy Bernal, and the president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. In this sense, the Attorney General addressed this destabilization plan consisted in the planning of an attack against the 21st Infantry Brigade of the Bolivarian Army. Precisely, William Saab pormenorized that a criminal group intended to take over the arms of the 21st Infantry Brigade and then assassinate Governor Freddy Bernal and subsequently initiate an escalation of terrorist attacks until making an attempt against the life of President Nicolás Maduro. In this regard, Saab also stated that linked to this case, 19 people have been arrested and there are also 15 arrest warrants pending to be executed.
This consisted of planning an attack against the 21 infantry brigades of the Bolivarian Army to take over the weapons of the body and then make an attempt on the life of Governor Freddy Bernal, and subsequently initiate an escalation of terrorist acts until the assassination attempt against President Nicolás Maduro.
In Venezuela, Foreign Minister Ivan Gil took to social network X to comment a post made by the Canadian embassy in the country, which he described as an attack on the South American nation. In this way, Gil stated, and we quote, "The government of Canada, trapped in its superiority complex, believing itself to be an empire and from its moral misery, insists on attacking Venezuela. Get your noses out of our country," the statement said. Later on, he commented on the Canadian interference, stated that incapable of condemning true human rights violations in the world, such as the genocide in Gaza, and with a shameful record in its own territory, it demonstrates how mean and lying it can be to play into the hands of terrorists and destabilizers. In Colombia, President Gustavo Petro stated on Tuesday that threats to overthrow him from the government remain. President Petro stated this during a speech at the Industrial University of Santander in the city of Bucaramanga in the northeastern part of the country. In addition to reiterating the need to democratize Ecopetrol, he made harsh remarks to the judicial branch. About the state oil company, he even assured that the arrest of its president and also the president of the union had been announced. As for the position of the control agencies against him, he ratified that the threats to overthrow him persist. Petro also warned that members of his cabinet are victims of judicial persecution and warned about the attempts of certain sectors to establish an institutional rupture. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and more. All the stories coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. The electoral process in El Salvador continues accumulating accusations of serious violations. Under this framework and facing several clashes, the scrutiny of the tally sheets in 6 departments ended at last. This operation that counts the votes for the Legislative Assembly is being carried out since the irregularities of the ballots were denounced. According to the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, the process was completed in the departments of Cabañas, San Vicente, Morazán, Cuscatlán, Chalatenango, and La Union. The representatives of the different political and social groups that have been present in the headquarters report the excess of votes, including as well the presence of ballots without faults and marked with pens, among other illegal acts.
And it seems to me that the Electoral Supreme Court should, at least in this final stage, stand firm and not to continue to do what they dictate. I will be very categorical. They are still in votes. Here there is a vote from population that must be respected.
The president of the Arenas party, Carlos Sade, denounced that the highest electoral body allows all kinds of outrages by the representatives of the ruling party.
As we see, the tables there is still not controlled by the popular Supreme Court. They do not want to put orders, still receiving instruction from the ruling party. Many people without credentials watch men up to 3 from new ideas against 1 from other parties, but still, that will not stop us to defend the votes of each of the Salvadorians.
The violence currently shaking Port-au-Prince, the capital of Haiti, has skyrocketed to unprecedented levels. More than 2,000 people have been displaced from their homes to flee criminal groups' warfare. Armed groups generated fear in the country, causing many people to flee their homes to avoid falling victims to the clashes between rival criminal groups. According to the International Organization for Migration, between February 5th and 11th, around 2,686 people left their homes in areas of the capital to save their lives. The most affected municipalities, according to the report presented by the organization on Tuesday, are Carrefour, Cité Soleil, and Tabarre. 94% of the people took refuge in the homes of relatives or friends, and the rest in squares and schools. The United Nations organization warned about the unprecedented upsurge in criminal violence since mid-January of this year. The president of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, attended this Tuesday the last session of the second international meeting of theoretical publications of left parties and organizations. He proposed actions to make the agreements reached sustainable. The president recalled that at first the meeting, the basis for uniting wills were proposed under the concept of responsibility, and from there to develop a socialist logic that faced the capitalist logic. In this second meeting, he stressed the need to find ways for action on the atheoretical basis to reproduce impacts and results. Against this backdrop, he recalled the importance of the Operation Truth devised by Commander Fidel Castro.
Because it has an enormous validity to Operation Truth that Fidel headed at the time with the things we have to defend today and with the challenges we are facing. I believe that even in times of digital networks or social networks, whatever you want to call them, of intensity in the media debate, in times of cultural colonization, we have to find particularly the path of the great truth that we have to share with the leftist forces, the revolutionary forces at international level.
The U.S. House of Representatives on Tuesday approved the impeachment of Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas. This way, he becomes the first presidential cabinet member to face impeachment in 150 years. This was the second attempt by the Republicans, who achieved their goal with only a one-vote advantage. The 214 representatives found Mayorkas to have been negligent in his duties in the management of the border with Mexico. They also charged him with a violation of public trust for allegedly making false statements to Congress. The case now proceeds to the Senate, where they do not believe that any understanding can prosper. Mayorkas repeatedly defended himself, in which he argued that the exponential increase in migration from the south of the border is not his fault, but rather the legal immigration system that Congress has not been able to solve. We have a final short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience, you can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with teleSUR. Final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Strong protests erupted on Tuesday in Kinshasa, the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo, aimed at the governments of the United States, France, Rwanda, and the United Kingdom that cooperate with the silent Holocaust that thousands live. Demonstrators accused Western countries of supporting the M23 rebel group that has committed bloody massacres in the eastern provinces of the country, such as North Kivu, South Kivu, or Ituri. They claim that the appetite of these nations for coltan and cobalt leads them to support, with the complicity of Rwanda, several violent militias that have forced nearly 7 million people to move, according to data from the International Organization for Migration. They also repudiate the passive attitude of the United Nations. Brazilian President Lula da Silva landed in Egypt on Wednesday as part of his first international tour of 2024, which will take him to other countries on the African continent. According to the Brazilian leader's presidential agenda, on Thursday will meet with the host president Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. In this regard, according to the Brazilian press, they will hold a working meeting behind closed doors, followed by an extended session with the working commissions. During Lula's visit to El Cairo, several bilateral cooperation agreements are also scheduled to be signed. It should be noted that Lula has been a strong supporter of the Palestinian civilians since the beginning of the Israeli attacks, and as part of his presence in Egypt, he will meet with the Secretary General of the Arab League, Ahmed Abu Gheit, before leaving for Ethiopia. In India, for the second day in a row, tens of thousands of farmers clashed with police as they attempted to march towards New Delhi, the capital, to demand guaranteed prices for their produce. Tens of thousands of farmers traveling in trucks and carts loaded with food and other supplies marched towards the capital after talks between farm leaders and government ministers failed to reach any consensus on their key demand for legislation to guarantee a minimum support price for their products. Farmers are also pressing the government to make good on its promise to double their income, write off their loans, and withdraw police cases registered against them during the 2021 protest. Farm leaders held talks with the government on Monday, but the meeting failed to break the deadlock. Some farmers and unions announced a nationwide rural strike for Friday. In Japan, people calling for marriage equality distributed chocolates on Valentine's Day to morning commuters at a busy Tokyo train station to call for change in the only G7 country that still lacks such protection. Wednesday marks 5 years since a lawsuit filed by more than a dozen same-sex couples against the government over lack of equal marriage rights. In May last year, a Nagoya court ruled that the government's policy of not recognizing same-sex marriage is unconstitutional, while the Osaka District Court said in June 2022 that marriage under the Constitution is only for unions between women and men, and that not recognizing same-sex marriage is valid. Meanwhile, in Greece, lawmakers on Wednesday began a debate on a historic bill to legalize same-sex marriage, which would make the country the first Orthodox Christian country to do so. The Valentine's Day parliamentary session comes after opposition and protests from the church, but also after a shift in public opinion, which, although still divided, supports the reform by a narrow margin. If passed, the bill would grant same-sex couples full parental rights, but would not allow males to seek children born in Greece through surrogacy. Civil unions for same-sex couples were legalized in 2015. The vote on the same-sex marriage bill is scheduled for Thursday.
The bill is a small contribution towards the creation of a society without discrimination and social exclusion. Looking at every life, it aims to give same-sex couple access to the institution of marriage to serve the best interests of these couples' children and to strengthen existing law prohibiting discrimination in employment.
People across China continue celebrating Lunar New Year with traditional dragon and lion dances, temple fairs, and spring festival markets. In the capital, Beijing, a temple fair is ongoing in the Grand View Garden, where tourists can view opera performance of Dream of the Red Chamber, one of the 4 great Chinese novels. In Hebei, Henan province, in the northern China, local actors entertain tourists with traditional shows such as stilt walking and lion dancing. Meanwhile, in Gambashi of Ordos city, in the northern China's Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, a lion dance on a high stage and an underwater dragon dance reflected the lively holiday atmosphere. We have come to the end of this news brief, but you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net and join us on social media, Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For Telesur English, I'm Alejandra Garcia. Thank you for watching.